teenager, was so obsessed with serial killers that she wanted to become one. She idolized and worshipped serial killers so much that at only 18 years old, she wanted to dedicate her life to becoming the most famous and prolific serial killer in all of history. This is a case from Germany, and due to Germany's strict privacy laws, a lot of information from today's case is actually missing, including the true identity of our killer. So we're just gonna call her Sarah. And Sarah, unlike most killers, actually had a pretty good childhood. She seemingly had really loving, supportive parents. She got good grades, she had a lot of friends, and then everything changed when she became a teenager. And you know, a bit of teenage rebellion is normal. Sarah started dressing in darker clothes, listening to heavier music, skipping school from time to time. But things were much darker than that. At only 16 years old, Sarah spread a rumor about herself at school that she was an S worker, like a lady of the night. And this wasn't true, but like Sarah's friends started to realize that Sarah was lying all the time. It seemed like she liked to shock people. She liked attention, even if it was negative attention. And actually really quick, because I just realized I forgot to say this in my intro, I know a lot of you guys have been asking me for more or longer content, especially if all of this goes away. So the second episode of Hot on the Case is out right now, and you can find all the platforms where you can find it on my profile. Now back to the case. It was around this time that Sarah got her first ever boyfriend, a boy named Leon, and the relationship was really intense, and Leon actually ended up breaking up with Sarah because he was scared of her, and for good reason, because as soon as he broke up with her, she started planning how she would kill him. At this point, Sarah's interests, her life had gotten so dark and disturbing. Sarah became obsessed with serial killers, and I'm not talking about an interest in true crime or being fascinated with psychology. Sarah worshipped these serial killers. She idolized them. She was crushing on them like some serial killer fangirl, especially Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. He was the background on her phone, and also she had posters of him and Ted Bundy covering her bedroom. And at this point, she's 17 years old to early 18 years old, and I'm just wondering what her family, her parents, think about all this. Sarah began fantasizing about becoming a serial killer, but Sarah didn't want to be any serial killer. She wanted to be the most famous and prolific of all time. Sarah wanted to have more victims than any other serial killer in history. And she began Googling how she was going to do that. She literally made a Google search that said, what is the best way to become a serial killer? So clearly she's no evil genius. In April of 2021, she bought a very large 12-inch sharp weapon and then began hunting for her first victims. Sarah signed up for a bunch of dating apps and sugar baby sites under the username DOMINA Cherry. Her bio on these dating sites was that she was a teen girl who had never slept with anyone before, but was also into really rough stuff. And she planned to meet a bunch of men this way because at this point she decided she really just hated men and wanted to kill all men after her breakup with Leon. And she planned to meet men this way and then lure them into a secluded area where she would end their lives. Because of the certain bio that Domina Cherry chose for her dating sites and her sugar baby sites, she started getting a lot of attention. She actually got over 220 messages from men on these sites in less than 3 days. Sarah had a date planned for May 3rd, May 4th, and May 5th, with the plan to kill each man on each date 3 days in a row. But her first victim that Sarah chose was a 39-year-old man named Zayed. And he messaged her on May 1st, and they planned to meet up that very night. Sarah had already told a handful of her friends about her plans to become this terrible serial killer, but right before she planned to meet up with Zayed, Sarah actually left a voicemail for one of her friends, a girl named Francesca, saying that she was about to kill her first one and to wish her good luck. And I know Sarah is known for being a liar at this point, but when Francesca gets that voicemail from Sarah, she doesn't go to the police, she doesn't tell anyone. All Francesca does is make a Google search of her own. Can I get in trouble if I know about a murder? The answer is yes. Zayed picked Sarah up around 8 p.m. and she directed him to a remote cabin that her family owned in the woods that actually did not exist. And once Sarah had Zayed turn onto like a secluded dirt road, she took out her 12-inch sharp weapon and plunged it into his neck. Zayed actually attempted to like fight off Sarah, and he was able to like hold his wound to stop the bleeding, and he just like took off. He ran towards the main road where a car stopped. They like helped him like a little bit because the person in the car was actually a nurse. And then they called the ambulance. The ambulance came and rushed him to the hospital. Meanwhile, Sarah is like also panicking, and she also ran away towards like the nearest town because Sarah didn't expect Zayed to like fight back. She just thought that he would automatically die. Sarah ran all the way to a nearby town, and she's looking completely disheveled. She's covered in blood, and she's just whispering to herself, "I'm a killer. I'm a murderer." So onlookers in the town called 911, obviously. Sarah was arrested and taken into police custody like 30 minutes after attacking Zayed. And I find it so funny, well, not funny because she's a killer, but you know what I mean, that Sarah wanted to be this like prolific serial killer that never got caught, and she was gonna have the most victims of any serial killer ever. And she got caught like 30 minutes later, like a half hour later. And I call Sarah a killer because although the hospital did as much as they could, the damage that Sarah did to Zayed was just far too much, and he did pass away surrounded by his family. And Zayed has definitely been scrutinized in his case for his decision to want to meet up with an 18-year-old girl. But Zayed's loved ones say that Zayed was a very good man. He was not the type to like look for hookups. And at the time of his death, he was looking for a long-term relationship and to settle down. And Sarah has never shown remorse once, and actually has only ever felt bad for herself because she got caught too early and didn't kill more men. And behind bars, Sarah actually tried to get her mom to kill her ex-boyfriend Leon because that was like her main target all along. Her mom said no, by the way. I don't think I made that clear. Her mom said she would not do that. And due to Sarah's young age, she received no prison time and was actually only sentenced to 12 years in a psychiatric hospital, and she could be released when she's 31 years old, which honestly really, really terrifies me because I think Sarah is a scary, scary girl and a danger to society. And as for Sarah's friend Francesca, who got that voicemail and knew that Sarah planned to kill Zayed, she was arrested and was facing 5 years in prison, but the charges were dropped. And that's all I have for today's case. Hope you guys all had a very happy new year, happy holidays, and I hope you guys know that you guys were truly one of the biggest blessings of my 2024. Make sure you guys all check out the second episode of Hot in the Case, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Love you. The murder of influencer Alexis Sharkey. Alexis is obviously very beautiful, but she was also very sweet and smart, just a total package. Grew up in Pennsylvania, she was always the top of her class, graduated with honors always. She had plans to go to med school, but she wanted to have a little bit of adventure first. She was this huge free spirit, so she made a big move to Texas. She was working at a restaurant, and there she started dating one of the regulars named Tom Sharkey. The two had an instant connection. They really, really hit it off. Tom was already divorced and he had 2 children from that previous marriage. He was actually quite older than Alexis. It was a pretty big age gap. He was actually 23 years older than Alexis, and his daughter was about Alexis's age. That really didn't seem to bother either of them. Alexis became a Monet seller, which is an MLM. And if you don't know what an MLM is, I'm sure someone in the comments will tell you all about it. It's pretty much a pyramid scheme. People at the top make a lot of money and people at the bottom lose money, but Alexis did really good at this. She was making quite a bit of money. Some people say that she was making like $30,000 a month doing this. So she's making quite a bit of money, and her and Tom did a lot of traveling, which of course they also would vlog for YouTube. Alexis grew a pretty vast and successful social media presence, especially doing the MLM. She had like quite a bit of followers through all different social media platforms. Alexis's phone was like her office. Coming from someone who does social media, I'm on my phone a lot, but Alexis was even more consistent than I could ever dream to be. She would be on her phone posting every couple hours, like literally on her phone 24/7. She would be posting on her story like at least every 2 hours. Tom and Alexis got engaged and then married 2 months later. They moved a few times, but you know, things were looking pretty good by 2020 for the couple. 2020, Alexis was 26 years old and Tom was 49. Alexis could make friends anywhere she went, and she made this really big group of close girlfriends that did like everything together. They were very close. And in November of 2020, on Thanksgiving, Alexis spent Thanksgiving with this group of girlfriends and not with her husband, Tom. She actually didn't end up going home until like way past 3 a.m. And the day after Thanksgiving is, of course, Black Friday. Alexis is an influencer. She's a Monet seller, an MLM seller. And on Black Friday, pretty much every other MLM seller woke up bright and early to post their Black Friday deals, but Alexis didn't. Alexis actually didn't post at all on social media on Black Friday, which is very odd for a girl who used to post every 2 hours at least. The day after that, Alexis and her friends had plans, but Alexis never showed up, and it was then that pretty much everyone realized that no one had heard or seen from Alexis, and it was actually Alexis's friends to report Alexis missing and not her husband, Tom. And when questioned by police about the last time Tom saw his wife, Tom changed his story over and over and over and over again, which is not a good sign. Not long later, tragically, the body of Alexis was found only a few miles from the apartment she shared with her husband, Tom. It was just on the side of the road, like she was trash or something. She wasn't wearing any clothes, and at first they actually couldn't determine her cause of death because there weren't any wounds or like apparent trauma to her body. But Alexis's friends were definitely pointing fingers at Tom. They thought Tom did something to Alexis because apparently Alexis had confided in all of her friends that she was unhappy in her marriage, that it was a bad marriage, that she had plans to divorce Tom. She actually had the divorce papers all ready. They just needed to be signed. And Alexis even told one of her friends that she was scared for her life. Eventually, Alexis's cause of death was determined to be strangulation, so her death was officially ruled and being investigated as a homicide, and afterwards, Tom just stopped investigating with the police, and only 2 weeks after his wife's death was ruled as a homicide, Tom fled the state without telling anyone where he went. And it actually took a while for them to find Tom, but when they did track him down, they were like, hey buddy, we still have questions for you about your wife's murder, so we need to meet up with you. We need to make plans to meet up because we need to talk, and we also want to get a DNA sample from you. And Tom, to the police's faces, was very cooperative, very nice, very helpful. He said, of course, we'll meet up, but he never showed up for that appointment because Tom fled the state again. He fled to Florida where his daughter lived. Police tracked Tom down to his daughter's house in Florida on October 6, 2021, this time with an arrest warrant. But like the piece of shit coward that he is, Tom Sharkey unalived himself in his daughter's home before the police could arrest him. He did that in his own daughter's house. And because of his own cowardness, Alexis will never get justice. She'll never get her day in court, and her loved ones will never get closure or answers about why Alexis had to lose her life. If you watched the end of this video, thank you so much. If you're wondering why my background's different, this is not permanent, this is temporary. It'll only be different like this for a week. My mom's a traveling nurse. I haven't seen her in like a year, so I'm visiting my mom right now. So it'll be like this for a week. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye. Love you so much. Her husband mysteriously vanished, and afterwards she married his best friend. This is an absolutely unbelievable case and really makes you feel like you can't trust anybody. This is Jerry Michael Williams, and he went by Mike. In school, Mike was very smart, very popular. He had lots of friends. He met his best friend in school named Brian Winchester. The two would be lifelong friends. They were like family. They were more like brothers. I really cannot stress enough how close these two guys were. When Mike was 15, he also met his high school sweetheart and his future wife, Denise. She was the beautiful cheerleader. He was the football star. Mike's best friend, Brian, also married his high school sweetheart, so the four of them were just this close group, lifelong friends, way into adulthood. They were inseparable. They did everything together. By December of 2000, Mike and Denise were about to celebrate their 6th wedding anniversary. They had a daughter, and they were planning on trying for their second child when Mike disappeared. On the morning of December 16th, Mike took his boat out to Seminole Lake to go duck hunting, and he never came home. An extensive search was done for 44 days. They found Mike's truck parked near the lake. They found Mike's boat in the lake, but they never found Mike. At first, it was believed that this was a terrible, tragic accident, that Mike's boat got caught on something that was at the bottom of the lake, which flung Mike from the boat, and he unfortunately drowned. Apparently, 79 people have fallen into this lake and have unfortunately drowned, but all of their bodies have been recovered except for Mike. They never found Mike's body. So now the new theory was that Mike fell in the lake, he drowned, and then he was eaten by alligators because this was Florida after all. Everyone just seemed to accept this answer except for Mike's mother. She just felt like there were too many things that didn't add up. For one thing, the theory on how Mike was flung from his boat just made no sense. When Mike's boat was found, it still had a full tank of gas, and if Mike was flung from the boat, he never would have been able to turn off his boat, which means it would have just drove itself in circles and eventually had run out of gas. But if he hadn't been flung from the boat, then how did he fall out of the boat? Also, at the time that Mike vanished, it was abnormally cold in Florida with low temperatures that were way below freezing. And alligators do not eat when it's cold. They don't eat, they don't hunt, they don't go attacking humans. They go into like an almost hibernation. Also, alligators don't eat people whole. If Mike had been eaten by an alligator, there would be signs. But nothing of Michael's was ever found. No parts of Michael, none of his clothes, none of his belongings, nothing. Until things started to magically show up. 6 months after Michael vanished, his waders, his jacket, his hunting license, and his flashlight were all found at the bottom of Seminole Lake, which further proved to everyone that Michael did fall in the lake and drowned, but here's the kicker. All of the belongings were in perfect condition. Even the flashlight was still turning on after supposedly being at the bottom of a lake for 6 months. It kind of seemed like maybe these items were planted there, but for what reason? Unfortunately, Michael's mother started to suspect that her daughter-in-law, Michael's wife Denise, maybe knew something more. Denise was oddly calm. She never helped in the search for her husband. She had a memorial funeral service for him very quickly after he disappeared. And when Denise heard that her mother-in-law was looking into Michael's disappearance, she threatened her. She told her to stop looking into her own son's disappearance or she would never let her see her granddaughter ever again. Denise also tried to cash out on her husband's life insurance policies after Michael had only been missing for 19 days. This request was denied because there was no concrete proof that Michael had drowned in the lake or that he was even dead at all, but shortly after Denise's requests were denied, all those items that belonged to Michael were found in the lake. And afterwards, Denise was granted a death certificate for her husband Michael and was given access to Michael's 3 life insurance policies, which totaled over $1.7 million. Shortly before Mike disappeared, he went and got a 3rd life insurance policy for $1 million, even though he already had 2, which totaled $750,000. And you would never guess who wrote and sold Mike that 3rd life insurance policy. It was his best friend, Brian, his lifelong best friend. And after Mike disappeared, his lifelong best friend, Brian, left his wife and then married his missing best friend's wife, Denise. Very, very suspicious. But there just was no evidence that anything other than a terrible tragic accident happened, but Mike's mother just would not give up on trying to find out what really happened to her son. And after being dismissed for years, no one believing her and just thinking she was some crazy lady, law enforcement finally started to take her seriously. There was just this one detail that just didn't sit right with anyone. Mike never went hunting, he never went on his boat alone. And when his boat was found, there were 2 life jackets on it, which made law enforcement strongly believe that there was someone else on Mike's boat with him when he disappeared. And they strongly suspected that Mike's wife Denise and Mike's best friend Brian, who were now married, knew something else. But Brian and Denise would not talk to the police anymore until August of 2016. By August of 2016, Brian and Denise had been having trouble in their marriage for quite some time. Brian had been unfaithful and Denise had filed for divorce. Brian was so unhappy about that he held his wife Denise hostage and threatened her with a weapon. Denise was able to convince Brian to let her go with promises that they could talk things out and try to work things out, but after he let her go, she immediately went to police to press charges against him. Investigators were hoping that this was the key to getting one of them to crack against the other, and they were trying to get Denise to turn against Brian and tell them what really happened to Mike, her first husband, but Denise would not budge. She wouldn't say anything about what happened to Mike. Same day, Brian was arrested for kidnapping and aggravated assault with a firearm, and since Brian was facing life in prison for those 2 charges, he made a deal. Brian would need to make a full confession about what really happened to Mike and testify against Denise, and in return, he would receive full immunity. So it turns out Brian and Denise had been having an affair for 3 years before Mike was murdered. They wanted to be together, but Denise didn't want a divorce because it was against her religion. But murder was fine, and they started planning Mike's murder for a year. On the day that Mike died, his best friend Brian invited him to go hunting, and while they were out on his boat, Brian pushed Mike into the water with hopes that his waders would pull him under the water. Mike was actually able to, get the waders off, and he was able to swim to a stump that was sticking out of the water and hold on to it. And Brian, who felt like there was no way out of this now, he was in too deep, took out his weapon and shot and killed his best friend Mike. And my heart just breaks thinking about how terrified and confused Mike must have been in his final moments. Brian then took police to where he buried Mike's body, and Denise was arrested and put on trial for Mike's murder almost 18 years after Mike first disappeared. It's really crazy how they almost got away with this, and to be honest, they kind of did in the end anyways. Denise was found guilty for first-degree murder, conspiracy, and accessory after the fact, and she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Denise appealed her convictions, so the first-degree murder charge and the accessory charge were both overturned. The only charge that was upheld was the conspiracy to commit murder charge, and she was sentenced to 30 years. And since Brian was given full immunity for his confession, he will never, ever, ever, ever be charged for murdering his best friend. It is really bittersweet, and I'm really interested to hear what you guys think about that. On one hand, without Brian's confession, we would never know what happened to Mike. We would never have his body. We would never be able to put him to rest. We would never be able to get Mike justice, even though, at the end of the day, I feel like justice wasn't even given. I'm definitely interested to hear what you guys think about this case, and if you feel like you'll ever be able to trust anyone ever again after hearing it. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments, and while you're there, please let me know what case you want to see me cover next. And until then, love you guys so, so much. Bye. This is the youngest woman in America to ever be put on death row. Krista Pike. Wow, where do I even start? Krista was born with severe brain damage because her mother was drinking pretty heavily throughout her entire pregnancy, and Krista had a terrible childhood. I'm not even gonna lie. Her parents were neglectful and abusive. Krista was often bounced around from mom's house, dad's house, grandparents' house, and they all sucked. By the time that Krista was 15 years old, she had been essayed by multiple men, and this abuse started as early as when Krista was 2 years old, and one of these men even included their dog in the essay of 12-year-old Krista. By the time that Krista was 18 years old, she was a high school dropout. She spent some time in juvie, but she said that she wanted to turn her life around, so she joined Job Corps. If you're not familiar with what this was a government-funded program where troubled teens and early adults could live on this campus all together. They would finish their education, learn skills, so hopefully one day they could have a great career. But only after a few days on campus, Krista met 17-year-old Daryl Shipp, and they started this relationship. It was extremely toxic. Daryl was really into a lot of really weird, dark, creepy things, and this toxic, abusive relationship that they had completely distracted them from what they went to Job Corps to do, which was better their lives. Krista also started this feud, you could say, with another girl on campus, 19-year-old Colleen Schlemmer. Colleen was at Job Corps for all the right reasons. She really did want to better her life and have a great career one day with computers. That was her dream. But Colleen was sucked into this petty teenage drama by Krista. Krista was convinced that Colleen wanted her man, Daryl, and that Colleen was obsessed with her man. But if anyone in this case is obsessed with anyone, Krista was obsessed with Colleen. She was always talking about her, how much she hated her. She was pretty much stalking her around campus, threatening her and bullying her all the time. And then one day in January of 1999, Krista goes up to Colleen and asks if they want to call a truce, and asked her if she actually wanted to hang out that night, kind of like a peace offering. So that night, 18-year-old Krista, her boyfriend, 17-year-old Daryl, and their friend, 18-year-old Shadola Peterson, all lured 19-year-old Colleen off of campus, and then once they were alone in this creepy part of the woods that was off of a park, Daryl and Crystal attacked Colleen while Shadola kind of stood back and was used as a lookout. This attack on Colleen lasted over 45 minutes and it was brutal. They were kicking her, beating her. They used a sharp weapon on her 300 times, and then they were dropping these big cement blocks on her until Colleen's skull was completely fractured. Krista even took a piece of the skull back to campus with her and was showing people and bragging to anyone that would listen about what she had just done. Krista has just unalived Colleen over jealousy over a boy, Daryl, that Krista had only known for 3 months. This was all over a 3-month-long relationship. And for some reason, all of these kids on campus that Krista is bragging to that she just unalived Colleen did not tell anyone until Colleen's body was found 2 days later. In police custody, all 3 of them were arrested, obviously, and they all made full confessions. And Krista was smiling the entire time, like she was totally pleased with herself. Since Shadola didn't actually have any physical involvement, technically, in the unaliving of Colleen, she walked away with only probation. Daryl, who was only 17 years old at the time, was sentenced to life in prison with possibility of parole in 2026, which is not that long away, but personally, I don't think there's any chance that they will let him out. And Krista, who was only 18 years old when she unalived Colleen, tried to blame her actions on her bad childhood. We hear that all the time. She was sentenced to death row and was the youngest woman in America to ever be sentenced to death. And Krista, who to this day has never shown any emotion or remorse for Colleen and Colleen's family, cried. She cried a lot. She bawled her eyes out when she found out that she was going to be sentenced to death. Krista also said that she did not think that she deserved to die, but Colleen did. Because you were insecure about your 3-month-long relationship, like, girl, please. And to only further prove how heartless Krista is, only a few days after she was sentenced, she sent to Daryl this letter. I'll put part of it on the screen now so you can pause and read it, but it's disgusting, and you will see. There is not an official date set to unalive Krista, but there's been a lot of talk recently to actually set a date since this happened all the way back in 1995. So if you want updates on that, you can always follow me. I'm constantly updating on the cases that we cover. There has been some controversy. Some people believe that Krista at 18 years old was too young for her sentence, also considering that Daryl was 17. So, you know, a year, actually only a few months younger than Krista. They received life in prison versus, you know, the death penalty. So why is 17 so different than 18? You can let me know what you think about that. Personally, I think that Krista is exactly where she should be. But that's completely my opinion, and I'm open to read all of your guys' opinions in the comments. I'm always reading my comments that you guys leave me. You guys always make up a lot of good points. You guys always have a lot of good, you know, points, thoughts, theories, questions, comments. So I love to read your guys' comments. So definitely let me know all your thoughts about this case, all of your opinions, and let me know what case you want to see me cover next. And I love you guys so much, and I'll see you tomorrow. This teenager killed his dad, and a year later he killed his mom, and he might have just gotten away with it. This is Colin Griffith. His parents were Charles and Catherine, and he also has an older adult brother. In 2020, Colin's parents divorced. His mother, Catherine, moved to Florida, but Colin stayed with his father, Charles, in Oklahoma. And to say that the custody battle for Colin was messy would be a massive understatement. In August of 2020, Catherine filed for full custody of Colin, claiming that her ex-husband was abusive. He had been abusive towards her for their entire 20 years of marriage, and now he was abusing their son, Colin. She claimed that Colin's father could not accept that his son liked boys. He was actually really furious about it, so he was kind of keeping his own son hostage, captive in his own home. He wasn't allowed to go to school. He wasn't allowed to leave the house. He wasn't allowed to talk to anyone, do anything. He was being completely isolated just because he liked boys. Colin wasn't even allowed to talk to his own mother on the phone. And Catherine would also claim that her ex-husband Charles was stalking and harassing her. But Colin's dad, Charles, told a completely different story. He said that none of that is true, that his ex-wife Catherine was mentally unstable and abusing substances and alcohol. He also claimed that his ex-wife Catherine was trying to impersonate as a male online and trying to catfish their son on Discord to try and convince him to run away from his dad's house. So this is obviously clearly a very very messy custody battle, and this custody battle would end, but not in the way that anyone thought it would. On February 14th, 2023, Colin called 911 to report that he had just shot and killed his father. 15-year-old Colin Griffith claimed that his father came at him with a sharp weapon like he was trying to kill him, so Colin felt like he had to shoot his father and kill him. He shot him in the head and he shot him in the chest. He obviously claimed that this was self-defense, but at only 15 years old, Colin was arrested and charged with the first-degree murder of his father, Charles. The evidence at the scene did not line up with Colin's story of self-defense, but about a month later, the investigators decided that there wasn't enough evidence to disprove Colin's story, so all the charges were dropped and he was sent to go live with his mother in Florida. But only 7 months after killing his father, more red flags would pop up in Colin's life. Colin told staff at his new school that his mom got so mad at him that she pulled a weapon on him. So the police were obviously called, and Colin's mom, Catherine, denied everything. She said that her son was just mad at her, trying to get back at her because she had just taken his phone and AirPods away. And this is a serious issue, but Catherine did try to kind of make excuses for her son, even though he tried to get her thrown in jail over headphones. She claimed that her son Colin was suffering a PTSD after years of abuse at the hands of his father, and also that Colin was detached from reality a little bit. So Colin was involuntarily admitted into a mental health facility, and he was kept at a facility for several months, where Colin told the staff if they put him back in the custody of his mother, that he would kill her. He actually said, "I've done it before, I can do it again." Regardless, Colin was soon released and he was put back in the custody of his mother, but only about a month later, the police would be called again. Catherine was trying to limit the amount of time that Colin was playing video games, and this made him so mad that Colin knocked his mother to the ground and started stomping on her. And when police arrived, Colin claimed that he did that out of self-defense. This time there was a witness. It wasn't a he said, she said. Colin's grandmother was there, witnessed the entire thing, and said that it was not self-defense. So Colin was arrested. He was momentarily placed in the custody of DCF, and again he told them if they put him back in the custody of his mother that he was going to kill her. But once again, Colin was put back in his mother's custody. A few months later, Colin graduated high school, and his mom, Catherine, tried to reward him by buying him a brand new, really nice car. She also took Colin on vacation that summer. I think she was kind of trying to buy his love a little bit. But only a few months later, in September of 2024, so really not that long ago, Colin tried to run away to his grandmother's house. But his grandmother's house was in a different county, which was against his probation. So a couple days later, his mom, Catherine, tried to go pick him up to kind of stop him from getting in trouble. So on September 8th, 2024, Catherine drove to go pick up her son at his grandmother's house because she did not want her son to get in trouble for breaking his probation. And that was around 4 p.m. But around 6 p.m., so only 2 hours later, Colin called 911 to report that him and his mom had gotten in a really, really big fight, and his mother had accidentally fallen on a sharp weapon and was dead. When the police arrived, Colin was already standing outside. He was covered in blood, and he told the police that he knew his rights and he wanted a lawyer. He did not seem upset. He did not seem sad. He did not seem mad. He did not seem stressed out. He did not seem frantic. He did not seem concerned for his mom. He was just calm. And inside the home, 39-year-old Catherine was tragically gone. She had been stabbed in the neck with so much force that the sharp kitchen instrument had come out the other side of her neck. And 17-year-old Colin, only 18 months after shooting his father, was arrested for the murder of his mother. He was being charged and tried as an adult, and if convicted, he was facing life in prison. During Colin's trial, Colin changed his defense strategy. Instead of claiming that his mom fell on the weapon, because obviously that did not happen, Colin claimed that he killed his mother out of self-defense. And if you're thinking, well, no jury would ever believe that, what a coincidence. He has to kill both of his parents in self-defense within a year of each other. Well, the jury were not allowed to be made aware that Colin had killed his father like a year and a half before he killed his mother, because it was not relevant, because he was never convicted of a crime. And just yesterday, on February 5th, 2025, Colin Griffith was found not guilty for the murder of his mother, Catherine. So he has been released after possibly getting away with murdering 2 people, the people that are supposed to be the most important people in his life. Personally, that's really scary for me, and I would be really scared for anyone that has any kind of relationship with this person in the future. A lot of people believe that Colin is a psychopath, but I couldn't find any official diagnosis for that. Also, there's been a lot of talk about reopening his father's case, but I couldn't find any official update about that. Really interested to get your thoughts on this case. I've been wanting to cover it forever. I've been following it since September, but I wanted to wait till the trial finished up. So definitely leave me all your thoughts in the comments. Really interested to keep commenting back with you guys and discussing this case. Do you think that Colin got away with murdering his parents, both of them? Or do you think that both of his parents were just really toxic, violent people and his story of events is true? Do you think that one of them was in self-defense and maybe the other one wasn't? Let me know all your thoughts, theories in the comment section when you're there. Please let me know what case you want to see me cover next. And until then, I'll see you guys in my next video. This brother and sister are the youngest children to be convicted for first-degree murder in the United States. The story of Catherine and Curtis Jones is very controversial and heartbreaking all around. Catherine is the older sister, and her brother Curtis was born only a year later. Their father was very abusive towards their mother. It was very violent, very terrible. When their mother was pregnant with Catherine, their father's abuse was so bad it actually led to their mother's uterus tearing and Catherine having to be born prematurely. When Catherine and Curtis were only toddlers, their mom left their father, so she was luckily able to flee her abuser, but she had to abandon her 2 children in the process, so she left them with this abusive man. And afterwards, a male relative of their father moved in with them, and this relative began to essay 5-year-old Catherine nearly every day for years. When she tried to tell her father of the abuse, he said he didn't believe her, but her younger brother Curtis told Catherine that he believed her because he was also being abused by this relative. Over the next handful of years, CPS would be called at least 3 times to investigate the accusations that the Jones siblings were being physically abused as well as being essayed, and every single time their father pretty much defended his relative and claimed that his 2 children were liars. Even after the CPS agents uncovered that this unnamed male relative had a history of essaying children, he was a registered essay offender and previously was even accused of essaying his girlfriend's daughter when he was living with her, the father still would defend him, and every single time the CPS investigations were dropped. The system that is meant to protect children has failed Catherine and Curtis time and time again, and their own father and mother have failed them as well. By 1999, 3 adults were living with the Jones siblings, their monster relative, their father, and their father's 29-year-old girlfriend named Sonia Spites, who allegedly also saw the abuse but did nothing. In 1999, Catherine was 13 years old and Curtis was 12 years old, and they've been abused by their relative since they were 4 and 5 years old. They were at their breaking point. Catherine told her younger brother that she wanted to kill all the adults that were hurting them and letting this abuse to go on, as well as, of course, kill their abuser. And for whatever reason, they decided to go after their father's girlfriend first. On January 6, 1999, 13-year-old Catherine and 12-year-old Curtis went and grabbed their father's weapon, while their father's girlfriend, Sonia, sat and did a puzzle at the kitchen table. They both opened fire on her. And at one point, Sonia actually tried to get up and grab the phone for help, but Catherine took it away from her. And once their father's girlfriend was dead, both the children began to panic because now this was real. Catherine tried to clean both their fingerprints off of the weapon, and then she called 911 to report that there was an accident, and then both children fled the home. Catherine and Curtis were caught and arrested early the next morning, and they were arrested on charges of first-degree murder, and they were going to be tried as adults, making them the youngest children to be tried as adults for first-degree murder in the United States. Once they were arrested, both siblings tried to take full responsibility and claimed that the other one had no involvement. They were trying to protect each other. 13-year-old Catherine was even offered a plea deal to testify against her younger brother, but she refused. Ultimately, both Catherine and Curtis were sentenced to 18 years in an adult prison. And then after their release, they would be on probation for the rest of their lives. And they're 12 and 13 years old and going to adult prison. Both of them said that they felt safer in prison than back home with their abuser. Due to Catherine's young age, the adult female prison that she was being sent to was worried about her safety. So they forced Catherine, at 13 years old, to spend the first 3 years of her sentence in solitary confinement, which is seen as like torture to full-grown, fully formed adults. And that's how she spent 13 to 16 years old, completely alone in dark, solitary confinement. And public opinion on the Jones siblings were completely split. There were people in 1999 that saw these children as cold-blooded monsters, and then there were other people that saw them as traumatized children that the system completely failed. And that it was very unfair that these children were being tried and sentenced as adults, having to spend their sentences in adult prison. And there's a lot of people that believe that it possibly would have gone a little bit different if they had been white. In 2016, Catherine was released from prison at age 30. She is now married, she's a mom herself, and she's a huge advocate and voice for victims and for fair sentencing for juvenile offenders. And her younger brother, Curtis, was released the following year, also at age 30, and he is now an ordained minister. So it seems like both of them have been rehabilitated and are trying to live better lives. We've talked about child killers before, and it's always an interesting conversation in the comments about if you think child killers can be rehabilitated. Do you think that juveniles should ever be tried and sentenced as adults, or is it a case-by-case basis? Let me know all your thoughts on this in the comments. Let me know what case you want to see me cover next, and I will see you guys next time. This is the case of the identical twins. One was found dead at the bottom of a cliff, and the other was arrested for her twins' murder. If you haven't seen it already, the newest episode of my podcast, Hot on the Case, is out right now. There's a video version and an audio version. If you like my videos here, you'll love my videos there, so go check it out. The identical twins in today's story, Allison and Anne, were always very, very close, but almost too close. They were very codependent. They did everything together. They even showered together. They just could not be apart from each other. People actually said it was like they had one soul separated into two bodies and that they could quite literally read each other's minds. But the codependent relationship between the twins could also be really dark, twisted, and violent. The two would constantly fight, and it would get really physical and violent. The two actually ended up opening their own yoga studio together in Palm Beach, Florida, and it was very successful, which is why they're known as the Yoga Twins. The twins actually got so popular that they were offered their own like yoga twin reality TV show, and they wanted to get like a new, bigger, nicer, and fancier yoga studio for the TV show, but then this TV show actually never ended up happening. So now the twins have this big fancy yoga studio that they couldn't afford. They actually ended up shutting down the yoga studio very abruptly and in a very shady way, without paying their employees for that month or refunding people's memberships for that time period. They were actually so hated in Palm Beach that the twins left town due to the scrutiny and moved to Utah. But there was so much bad publicity like tied to their names. They even had like snark pages made about them on the internet that they ended up changing their names. So now Allison was Alexandra Duvall and Anne was Anastasia Duvall. In Utah, the twins tried to open up another yoga studio, but that one flopped and it went under very quickly. They were in so much debt, they had to file for bankruptcy, and they were under so much stress that both twins developed like a drinking problem. They started drinking a lot. Now they're adding a bunch of alcohol into an already toxic, violent, codependent relationship between the two twins. Alexandra actually got a DUI in Utah. She posted bail and then fled the state. The twins decided to move to Hawaii. On May 29th, 2016, Anastasia had planned a camping trip with her new boyfriend named Federico, and her twin sister Alexandra kind of decided to like invite herself and tag along on their like couple camping trip last minute. And Federico was actually trying to help his girlfriend Anastasia like stop drinking, so this was actually like an alcohol-free camping trip, but Alexandra snuck some in. They actually weren't even at the camping spot for very long. Federico left for a second, turned around, and realized that the twins were gone and they had taken his car. The twins were actually driving on the very notorious highway, the road to Hana, which is a very beautiful road, but it's actually quite dangerous because it's very like twisty, turny, narrow, and on the side of a cliff. People driving around next to them saw the twins fighting in the car, punching each other, pulling each other's hair, and slapping each other. And they're doing this while driving on this super dangerous road. And then those witnesses saw the car take a sharp turn left and accelerate off the side of the cliff. Alexandra, who was driving, walked away with only minor injuries. She survived, but her twin sister Anastasia was tragically dead at the scene. So the police are trying to figure out what happened here. They have all these witnesses saying that they saw the twins fighting in the car, and then the car just suddenly drove off the cliff. And then they realized that there's a bunch of tire marks, skid marks on the road that were consistent with someone accelerating off of the cliff. There were no signs that they tried to brake or slow down or anything. And Alexandra was showing no emotion, even though she just drove off a cliff and her twin sister was dead. Alexandra, who was the one to drive off the cliff, had a blood alcohol level of 3 times the legal limit at the time of the crash, so clearly very intoxicated. Was this a drunk driving accident or a murder? Did she purposefully try to drive off that cliff to kill her sister? Anastasia's boyfriend, Federico, who was actually on that camping trip with the twins, said that he didn't seem shocked that something like this happened. He said that him and Anastasia were trying to actually plan their own life together, separate from Alexandra. Anastasia wanted to quit drinking, move away, and start a life and a business with Federico, and this made Alexandra furious. That the week before the crash, Federico said that he heard Alexandra say that she wanted to kill her sister. And this is really weird, but before the crash ever even happened, Alexandra would tell people, "I killed my sister," like it already happened. Federico also said that after his girlfriend Anastasia died, her twin sister Alexandra started to wear her clothes. She tried to come on to him and even tried to get in the shower with him, like she was trying to take over Anastasia's life. The twins' own father actually said that it should have been the other twin, that the wrong twin died. And almost immediately after the crash, Alexandra was arrested for another DUI. She was swerving on the road and almost hit a bunch of pedestrians. And once again, she was over 3 times the legal limit. And this is right after she was in this terrible, traumatic car accident where her sister died. Eventually, Alexandra was arrested for the second-degree murder of her sister, and her defense actually tried to argue that Anastasia, the sister that passed away in the crash, was actually the one that caused the crash because she was fighting with her sister who was driving and pulling at her hair, and that's what caused her to drive off the cliff. The judge actually ended up finding that there wasn't enough evidence to convict Alexandra beyond a reasonable doubt, so he found her not guilty and released her. I'm sorry, she was 3 times the legal limit. We couldn't even have convicted her of vehicular manslaughter. But Alexandra Duvall is out free right now, and there's a lot of people that think that she got away with the murder of her twin sister, but I'm interested to hear what you guys think. Do you think she got away with murder? Do you think that she was also attempting to try and take both of their lives when she drove off that cliff? Or do you think it just was a terrible, terrible accident? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time in my next video.